Some workers receiving minimum wage will see a pay increase in the new year. Nearly half of U.S. states and Washington, D.C. will increase their minimum wage by the end of 2021. I want to bring in the author of that article, Aimee Picchi. She is a CBS News MoneyWatch reporter. Aimee, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on to talk about this important issue.
It is important, and 20 states are raising the minimum wage next month, so they see it as important too. Can you highlight some of the more notable ones that we'll be seeing?
Yeah, I think one of the more notable ones is Florida. The voters in that state passed a ballot initiative in November that eventually will raise the minimum wage there to $15 an hour. And that was significant for a number of reasons. One is it's saying that, people in a lot of states want higher minimum wages. They believe in this, even though the federal minimum wage has been stuck at $7.25 an hour for 11 years. It's been a record amount of time that the federal minimum wage has not been increased. And so, Florida voters are saying, yes, we want $15 an hour. Now, that's going to take some time to get there, the number of steps until it reaches that amount. Actually, in January, the increase will be a cost of living change or inflation change. And then the first change in Florida under the ballot initiative will take place later in 2021 when it increases to $10 an hour. So you see that there's going to be a while until it gets to $15 an hour. But what's significant about that is that Florida is actually one of 8 states that are eventually raising their minimum wages to $15 an hour. So that reflects the success of the Fight for 15 campaign, which started several years ago. And when it started, a lot of people said this sounds crazy. It's a huge amount to pay for minimum wage. But since then, people have come to realize that, you can't live on $7 and $7.25 an hour, that it is a poverty wage. And that's sort of taken hold in the popular consciousness and led to voters really saying, we want to see more and more for low paid workers.
Now I would say $15 an hour in many places is not enough, as you look forward. But they used to say, too, in Florida, they pay you in sunshine. So it's nice to see that they are actually paying some real dollars now. Of the 20 states that we're talking about, where might this minimum wage increase have the biggest impact? And why do you think that is?
Well, the biggest impacts are going to be in states where there are high costs of living and where there tend to also be a lot of workers. So you have the states like New York, New Jersey, and California. So more workers are going to be impacted by those increases in those states. I also just want to point out that there's one state that was supposed to get a minimum wage increase, but doesn't look like it's going to happen in January, and that's Michigan. And the reason why is because they have a law that if the unemployment rate is above 8.2% in the preceding year, the minimum wage increase won't take effect. And so there it's interesting because we're seeing the impact of the coronavirus recession actually leading to no minimum wage increase, because so far this year for Michigan, the unemployment rate is above 10%. So economists at this point don't believe that it's going to get lower than 8.2%, which means no minimum wage increase for folks in Michigan. So that's also significant. And, people in that state, they do need a pay increase as well.
Yeah, okay, so you have Michigan. It looks like there's also 4 states in the District of Columbia that later in the year will raise their minimum wage. Can you break down some of the timelines for us?
Yeah, they're coming later in the year. May and July, basically, are the other ones. So by the end of 2021, there will be 24 states and Washington, D.C. that have higher minimum wages. I also want to point out that there are a number of states where the federal minimum wage is still in effect. And these states tend to be in the South and in the West, like Alabama, and I believe Kentucky is another one where it's effectively $7.25 an hour. And, I think the big question for 2021 is what will happen to the federal minimum wage, because there is at least voter momentum and a popular call for a higher minimum wage. And so, will that deliver some kind of momentum in Congress to raise the federal minimum wage? If not, maybe those states will take steps. The voters in those states or the lawmakers in those states will take steps themselves, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah. Another question I have, just because we are still dealing with the coronavirus crisis, you have some essential workers like grocery store clerks, they're getting paid minimum wage. Because of that, has there been more support behind increasing minimum wage, or maybe this drive to get the federal government to consider it?
Yeah, I believe so. It was interesting when the coronavirus hit in March and looking at how a lot of low-wage employers reacted to that. We saw grocery stores say, we're going to give people hero pay, to come into work because they're risking their lives and they're doing hard work to make sure that the economy keeps running. But a few months later, many of those companies, they took back that hero pay. And now we're in a situation where the coronavirus rates and the spread is even worse than it was in the spring. And I think it is a reflection of people saying, you know what, we realize that these low-paid workers are doing really important work for the economy. They don't get paid a lot. We need to do something about that. Let's, have lawmakers, voters change the law so that we can enact this higher minimum wage at the state level, even if the federal government isn't going to do it.
All right, Aimee Picchi, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being with us and explaining all this. You can read Aimee's article right now on CBSNews.com. I suggest you do.